So my uncle and I
will take your thunder.
are gonna take the 6.7 motor out of this 2011 F350. We bought it on auction with a seized motor. We'll get to that on a separate video. But this video is gonna show you a step-by-step cab removal on this truck. I mean, we do have a car lift, that makes it handy. This is not in order, this is just the order in which we do it. So here it is. So first step, we're gonna disconnect both batteries. So let's do that now. So now that both batteries are out, we're gonna disconnect the PCM harness. You can just take these two off. Disconnect the MAF air sensor. I'm gonna take this whole intake box off. Disconnect these EGR sensors and pull this out of the way. So as I'm taking the intake boxes off, my uncle's gonna take the radiator hose off. These things do get stuck, so a little WD-40, tap around it, and it will come off. So now that the intake box is off, radiator hose off, I mean, you can pick anywhere you want to start at. So, yeah, these are just pull clips to pull those off. We're gonna disconnect all the little radiator hoses for the transmission cooler and whatnot. I'm gonna take care of some of the EGR clips, so let's do that now. So now that we have most of the coolant lines off, you gotta take the battery box or the intake box out so you can get to this lower hose for the transmission cooler. So it took the two lines off of the transmission cooler, so now that can come off. So my uncle took off that radiator hose, the upper one. Now he's taking off the intercooler, so you got to disconnect this, disconnect it here, and a few other coolant hoses, and then they'll come out. So now at this point, since I have most of this off, EGR sensors off, some coolant lines off, transmission cooler off, and the intake, I'm going to go underneath here and take out this fender well. So I'll go underneath the passenger fender well here, and you can get to the heater core lines. This lower radiator hose, you disconnect it in the middle. We already done that previously, so you disconnect that in the middle, drain all the fluid, so that's already done, and that goes up with the cab, so you don't have to worry about that. So when you disconnect your wiring from your alternator, there is a little clip down here. Unplug that. This goes to your terminal. I just take this, if I can get it out, and wrap it around the motor like so. So we're looking at the water pump. This top one can stay. I just kind of route that stays with the motor. I tend to disconnect the bottom one and have that go up with the chassis. So you take this clip out, pull it out, and put it to the side. So now that everything is pretty much open to disconnect, I'm gonna start in with the wiring harness. So we disconnected two from the PCM. Most of these are gone from the EGR. I'll disconnect this one back here. And then if you look down in here, you have three of them, 1, 2, 3, that you gotta, actually you have 4 or 6. Disconnect all these, and you can bungee them onto your motor. So I'm gonna get that going now. So most of these harnesses are disconnected, but you'll find this bottom one way down there, and it's a lot easier to get underneath right here and reach in and grab it. So now that we have the harnesses disconnected from here, you could lay those on the motor. Those stay, obviously, but you'll see that this this positive and negative side of the terminal, you'll have this junction box. You just take this lid off, disconnect it here. You got to disconnect it. If you don't and lift the cab up, you'll rip it all out. So disconnect this, lay these cables with your harness, and we'll continue. All right, so like I said, all this is nice and tidy. This has already been evacuated, the AC line previously, so we're gonna disconnect that 10 mil or 12 mil, whatever that is. Disconnect that lays on the motor. and we'll go from there. There's a clip here you can disconnect, and then you can disconnect the upper AC hose either here or at the cab over there. So okay, so the AC line is tucked away nicely. I filled in where it goes into so no debris gets in there. This is disconnected because this goes up with the chassis, this stays with the motor. So now that gives me access to this lower radiator hose and the AC line that goes into the condenser back there, which I have to get underneath and do. So I'm gonna take that off and put it away. So back to my uncle's side, he was taking out the intercooler. We'll show you what that looks like. You have two intakes and your coolant lines going into it, and it opens up quite a bit. Yeah, he's taking that lower clip off because he's gonna start removing the reservoir, the coolant reservoir. So once you disconnect the coolant lines and the battery box, this is a solid unit. You look back here and you kind of have some T-fittings. I don't know if you can see that right there. You got to disconnect first and then it'll all be taken off. So I think my side, passenger side's done. AC lines, harnesses are disconnected, batteries out, intake boxes off, radiator hoses are off. I tuck the ones that are in the radiator underneath thing, so you always got to watch out for where it's going to snag. So I push those there. The harnesses and battery cables are up on the motor, and for right now this is complete on this side. I double check everything to see what goes up the cab, what stays on the motor. Everything's looking good. Here soon we'll get underneath. I know there's a ground cable from chassis to cab that we'll pull off, and then we'll do motor mount or body mounts. So here's the transmission cooler line. You take this top one off because it's routed through your whole radiator system, so that will go up and this will stay on the chassis. So you got to make sure to take this off. All right, so the cooler line's here, that's off. So since I'm already here in front, I'm going to disconnect these two clips, and then I think this is your power steering, but I'm going to disconnect it from here, and yeah, then we'll work our way up. All right, so that's off. Make sure you have an oil pan to catch that power steering fluid. I think it's ATF, but. So with the master cylinder, took those two bolts out. There are sensors, a couple of them that are connected to the side. So I took this off first and then disconnected the sensor. There's these two oil lines right here. They're marked in blue, and one without. You can see that little tab right in here. They're blue. So you got to make sure they go in the right way. If they're not marked, just put some tape on them and those get out of the way. So this ultimately will just bungee it to the motor because this stays with the motor. So we're going to disconnect a few more things and we'll show you where that's at. I think next or sometime soon we'll disconnect this fender well, take all the bulkhead harnesses off, and see where we're at from there. So one thing to note is there is a ground wire connecting to your firewall or to your block up to your cowl. So make sure to take that off. Okay, so we are on the driver's side. I took the fender well out. Like I say, it's the 5.5s and an 8 mil. Take that off and you could expose all your harnesses. So you gotta disconnect that one. You got this one to disconnect. Just look underneath and you'll see a lot of these harnesses need to be disconnected. You don't want to forget one or else you're gonna yank it out with the chassis. So we're gonna get to that. We're coming pretty close to raising it. We still have the cab bolts to take off, a ground wire on the other side, and we're gonna double check everything. When we raise it, we'll raise it up slow and check to see if we ain't snagging on anything. So I'm gonna disconnect these harnesses and we'll go from there. All right, so the next thing I'm gonna do, we have the power steering reservoir. This has the ATF in it. But anyway, we want to take off this that tees off right here that goes along the chassis. So we're going to take this tee off and we're going to disconnect it to this tee. So disconnect it there. And then as for the reservoir, we're gonna disconnect one of them. It's gonna be the bigger one that goes to your pump, to your reservoir. So we're gonna disconnect that. So we have the oil pan sitting down below and take it off from there. So now we're gonna start in with the cab mounts. Now the trick to these is put a little heat on them because they have Loctite. So here's the front cab mount, and you'll have to do that to every single one most likely. So torch them for about 30 seconds, get them nice and hot, and buzz them off. I like to break them loose and then buzz them off. And then if it spins, there's a little kind of square nut up top of here. I forgot what size, a 21 or 22. You gotta hold that and then buzz them off. But when you get them hot, you could just twirl them on out of there. So we got all the cab bolts out besides this one. It's usually these front two that give you the toughest time because there's so much water and rust and mud in there. So we torch it for a good minute or two, and then my uncle's up here with a 22 or a 19 socket within a 15/16 socket, holding the top because they'll bust free. So you hold that there, and then I'm just working this with a 4-foot breaker bar to get that out. It's a pain in the butt, but it'll come out. So now that the cab bolts are out, there is a ground wire, like I said previously, from the chassis. I'm on the passenger side of the truck. And behind the front tire, you'll see, where's it out? Right here. This ground strap, the braided strap, connects to your cab and then to your chassis. So you got to disconnect that or you'll bust them off. I've done it before, so that's how I know about this. So now on the driver's side, you got to take off the e-brake cable. So it's kind of a bear. You got to get the kind of the bullhorn pliers. You got to press those in, push that out. But you can disconnect it from right here, and then pull through the frame. So I get 2 channel locks. Separate that out a little bit. And then you could get this cable undone, and then like I said, you got to press all those clips in and push them out, then you're free and clear. So since we're under here, we got the brake line off. So we did that. And now you got to take the transmission shifting cable majigger off. So I believe we just take off these 2 bolts and then disconnect this. It's like a Heim joint, so we got to disconnect that. There's the transmission cable, so we just let that dangle just like that. You also got to disconnect the steering linkage right here. You can just separate it right there and then pop that out, put the bolt back in, and then you should be free and clear there. So from the looks of it, looks like we got everything. We always miss 1 or 2 things, but that's why when we lift it up with the lift, we always look everywhere to see if we're going to be pinching or see if we missed a line or whatnot. So we're going to kick our feet underneath the truck, you know, just right at the body line, and we're going to see if we can't lift it right now. So that's it. We have the cab completely up in the air. There was just a few snags because this was a incident response truck. So there's extra wires that normally you wouldn't have to deal with. So it's up. It's all the way up. So now we get a next video. We'll show you how to separate the torque converter from a seized motor. And we're gonna yank this out and stick a 60,000 mile motor in it. So that's it. It's not as bad as what you think it is. It just takes a little time and a YouTube video to get you through. So, and you have to have a car lift. So anyway, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please send a comment and all that jazz. Take care.